The emergency klaxons had been screaming for 17 minutes when Colonel James Diaz realized his hands were trembling. Not from fear, he'd faced mortar fire in Kandahar without flinching, but from the impossible geometry unfolding before him in the subterranean chamber beneath the National Mall. The Washington Monument's crystalline core pulsed with bioluminescent frequencies that his engineer's mind knew shouldn't exist, each surge sending ripples through space-time itself, warping the edges of his vision like heat shimmer over desert sand. 72 hours until winter solstice. 72 hours until dimensional erasure, according to Inanna's calculations, and he still couldn't fully process those words without his Methodist certainty cracking deeper. "Colonel, we're reading temporal distortion, increasing by 0.3% every hour," Captain Sarah Chen called from the monitoring station, her voice tight with controlled panic. Around them, the ancient chamber, predating the monument's official 1884 construction by millennia, hummed with subsonic frequencies that made his teeth ache and his dreams bleed into waking consciousness. Hieroglyphs manifested and dissolved along the obelisk's hidden interior surface, script that shouldn't exist because it predated Sumerian cuneiform by 6,000 years. Because it told stories his Sunday school teachers had never mentioned, because it named Jesus Christ as Enlil Christos, rogue commander of the Anunnaki, architect of humanity's greatest deception. Outside, Washington, D.C. cowered under military lockdown. Homeland Security had established a 3-mile perimeter, their tactical teams converging with Vatican operatives who carried weapons blessed by papal authority and modified with technology that defied conventional physics. Somewhere in that chaos, Anunnaki loyalists moved with predatory patience, waiting to ensure Enlil Christos's endgame reached completion, all of them circling, hunting, desperate to control or destroy what pulsed beneath America's most iconic monument. James pressed his palm against the chamber wall, feeling vibrations that resonated with something primal in his chest, something that whispered memories he'd never lived. The stone felt warm, alive, impossibly smooth despite appearing rough-hewn. His reflection in its polished surface looked haunted, older than his 63 years, eyes carrying the weight of knowledge that felt like betrayal of every prayer he'd ever spoken. 3 weeks earlier, retirement had tasted like Sunday mornings and black coffee in his Alexandria townhouse. The alarm clock's gentle chime at 600 had been a luxury James Diaz savored with Methodist gratitude. Retirement suited him with the precision of a well-executed engineering schematic, structured, predictable, blessed with the comfortable rhythms of a man who'd served his country for 4 decades and earned his rest. His townhouse on Prince Street embodied that same ordered peace. Hardwood floors he polished every Saturday, bookshelves arranged by campaign and classification level, morning light streaming through windows that overlooked cobblestone streets where tourists photographed colonial architecture without understanding the infrastructure marvels hidden beneath their feet. He'd built half of Washington's classified underground networks, systems so sensitive that even in retirement, his security clearances remained active, gathering dust in some Pentagon database like medals he no longer wore. The knowledge lived in his mind like muscle memory, load-bearing calculations for monuments, redundant power grids beneath Capitol Hill, geothermal anomalies under the National Mall that made foundation engineering a nightmare of variables. Pride flickered whenever he walked past the monuments, quiet satisfaction that his work would outlast him, that American power rested on foundations he'd reinforced with mathematical precision and unshakable faith. Sunday mornings meant Metropolitan United Methodist Church, the red brick sanctuary on South Washington Street where he'd worshipped for 15 years. Reverend Patricia Okonkwo preached with intellectual rigor that satisfied his engineer's need for logical theology, sermons that wove biblical scholarship with social justice, faith with reason. James sat in the same pew, third row left, and sang hymns with the conviction of a man whose life had been built on certainty. Certainty in God, country, physics, the fundamental stability of a universe governed by discoverable laws. His coffee, that particular Thursday evening, tasted the same as always. Dark roast brewed in the French press Linda had bought him before the cancer took her. The ritual provided comfort, structure, a tether to who he'd been when she smiled over breakfast and teased him about measuring coffee grounds with engineering precision. He missed her most in these quiet hours, when the house felt too large and too silent, when military discipline couldn't quite fill the spaces where love used to live. The kitchen light above his breakfast nook cast familiar shadows across technical journals and crossword puzzles. Everything exactly as it should be, everything safe, known, controlled, until the woman who called herself Inanna of Nibiru materialized between his refrigerator and his carefully organized spice rack. And Colonel James Diaz's ordinary world shattered like glass under tectonic pressure. She was luminous in a way that hurt to perceive, as if human eyes weren't designed to process her existence. Not glowing, that word was too simple, but rather occupying space with an intensity that made the air crystallize around her form. Tall, impossibly so, with features that seemed simultaneously human and utterly foreign, skin that shifted between bronze and something that resembled starlight given flesh. Her eyes held depths that suggested she'd watched civilizations rise and collapse with the detached interest of a geologist observing sediment layers. James's coffee cup shattered against the floor. His hand moved automatically toward the Sig Sauer he no longer carried, muscle memory overriding rational thought. What the hell, Colonel Diaz? Her voice resonated with harmonics that shouldn't exist in human speech, frequencies that vibrated in his sternum and made his vision swim. The Washington Monument is not what you believe it to be. It is a resonance antenna, anchoring your Earth in the observable universe's dimensional frequency. In 72 days, at winter solstice, its crystalline core will collapse. Your planet will experience dimensional erasure. I require your expertise to prevent this. The words arrived in English, but carried meanings that bypassed language entirely, downloading concepts directly into his consciousness: quantum entanglement across cosmic distances, dimensional mathematics that made Einstein look like elementary arithmetic, the terrible revelation that human civilization was a seeded experiment 10,000 years in development. "You're insane," James heard himself say, though his engineer's mind was already cataloguing impossibilities. Her appearance without entry, the way gravity seemed negotiable in her presence, how she knew details about the monument's foundation that were classified beyond presidential clearance. "This is a psychotic break. I'm hallucinating. The coffee was contaminated. I'm having a stroke." "The monument exhibits geothermal anomalies you documented in 1987, Inanna continued with relentless precision. "Subsonic resonances you attributed to bedrock compression, electromagnetic fluctuations that required 3 redesigns of the foundation stabilization systems. You wondered then why an obelisk built in 1884 showed evidence of construction techniques that wouldn't be developed for another century. You wrote classified memos questioning the metallurgical composition of the capstone aluminum, which contained isotopic ratios impossible for 19th century refining." James's legs buckled. He caught himself against the kitchen counter, heart hammering with combat veteran intensity. She was right. Every word was classified truth he'd buried in reports marked cosmic top secret. Inconsistencies he'd rationalized because the alternative suggested either mass conspiracy or engineering fraud at the highest levels of American government. "The Anunnaki seeded your species," Inanna said, and the kitchen lights flickered as if reality itself struggled with her presence. We gave you consciousness, language, the cognitive architecture for civilization. We built resonance networks across your planet, pyramids, megaliths, monuments that you worship without understanding their function. Earth is anchored, protected, hidden from dimensional predators who hunt for inhabited worlds like yours the way you hunt for oil deposits. This is... James pressed his palms against his eyes, Methodist certainty cracking like ice under pressure. This destroys everything, Genesis, creation, Jesus Christ, all of it. Jesus Christ was Enlil Christos, Inanna said, and her voice carried something that might have been ancient grief. My half-brother, a rogue commander who turned against our mission. His crucifixion was not sacrifice, but sabotage. He installed himself as a mimetic virus in human consciousness, a theological backdoor that would ensure dimensional collapse when the resonance network failed. He made you worship the mechanism of your own destruction. James's breath came in sharp gasps, the kind of hyperventilation he'd only experienced once before during a mortar strike that killed 6 of his engineers in Fallujah. His hands shook violently now, not from fear, but from the complete demolition of foundational truth. Methodist services, Linda's faith in their final weeks, his own prayers over her grave. All of it. What? Lies? Misunderstanding? Worshipping the architect of human extinction? Get out! He managed, voice ragged. I don't care if you're real or hallucination. Get the hell out of my house. Inanna remained motionless. And in that stillness, James recognized something terribly familiar. The patience of a commanding officer who'd seen soldiers break under impossible orders, who knew that rejection was just the first stage of acceptance. You will refuse, she said quietly. It is expected, but you will reconsider when you examine the evidence I leave. You are a man of faith, Colonel, but also of reason. Your God gave you both. Perhaps that was the only mercy we managed. She extended one hand, and a data module materialized in her palm, crystalline, pulsing with interior light, impossibly advanced. James didn't reach for it. Couldn't. His entire epistemology was collapsing, Methodist certainty dissolving into cosmic horror, and he couldn't process another impossibility. I'm the last of my faction, Inanna continued, and for the first time, emotion cracked through her alien composure. Survivor's guilt, the profound exhaustion of being the final witness to catastrophic failure. The others died, preventing Enlil Christos's earlier attempts. I have fought for your species for millennia, Colonel. I am tired. I am alone. And I am asking for your help, because you are the only human with the classified knowledge and engineering expertise to access the monument's core without triggering Homeland Security's lethal countermeasures. She placed the data module on his kitchen table beside his ruined coffee and scattered technical journals. 3 days. Examine what I've given you. Then decide if your retirement is worth more than your species' survival. And then she was gone, not vanishing so much as ceasing to occupy observable space-time, leaving James Diaz alone in his kitchen with shaking hands and a faith that felt like shattered porcelain, beautiful and broken and impossible to repair. He stared at the crystalline module for 17 minutes, counting his heartbeat, praying prayers that felt like shouting into void. Then, because he was an engineer before he was anything else, because Linda had loved him for his relentless need to understand, because 40 years of military service had taught him that ignoring intelligence got people killed, James Diaz picked up the module and began his journey into nightmare revelation. The crystalline module opened like a flower under James's touch, projecting 3-dimensional schematics across his darkened study with luminous precision that made his classified engineering software look like children's toys. He spent 3 sleepless nights diving through data that rewrote everything he understood about Washington's infrastructure, each revelation hitting like physical blows to his Methodist certainty. The monument's foundation showed construction signatures impossible for 1884 technology. Molecular bonding at the granite interfaces, electromagnetic shielding embedded in stone that predated Maxwell's equations by decades. Subsonic resonance chambers that he himself had measured and rationalized as natural geological formations. The evidence was irrefutable, mathematical, the kind of proof that his engineer's mind couldn't dismiss as hallucination or theological metaphor. On the fourth morning, James drove to the National Mall with hands that no longer trembled, steadied by decision rather than acceptance. The monument rose against autumn's sky like a prophet's finger, 555 feet of marble and granite, and aluminum capstone that now felt like cosmic conspiracy rather than patriotic triumph. Tourists photographed it with oblivious joy, while James counted his heartbeats and wondered if divine revelation always felt like morning. He approached from the west side, where security cameras had documented blind spots he'd helped design in 2003. The subsonic hum started when he crossed Constitution Avenue, frequency so low it bypassed ears entirely, resonating directly in his sternum like a second heartbeat, irregular and organic and utterly wrong for inert stone. His vision swam at the edges. The monument seemed to pulse, breathing with rhythms that suggested not machinery, but biology, some vast organism masquerading as architecture. James pressed his palm against the monument's eastern face, where marble met foundation granite in joints his team had reinforced 30 years prior. The stone felt warm, impossibly so for November morning, and beneath his fingertips he felt vibrations that his mind tried desperately to categorize as traffic or wind or anything explicable. But he was an engineer. He knew structural resonance. This was something else entirely. Complex harmonics that suggested intentional design, antenna frequencies calibrating against cosmic signals his instruments had never been built to detect. The prophetic dream came that night with the force of architectural collapse. James found himself standing inside the monument's hollow interior, except the interior was infinite, extending through dimensions his sleeping mind struggled to render. Crystalline structures grew from the foundation like frozen lightning, pulsing with bioluminescent frequencies that spelled warnings in languages he couldn't read but somehow comprehended. Inanna stood beside him, or rather, her consciousness occupied the same impossible space, and showed him the mechanism with clinical precision. 72 days, her voice echoed through dream space that felt more real than waking. Winter solstice. When Earth's axial tilt aligns with galactic core frequencies, the resonance network must achieve perfect harmonic synchronization to maintain dimensional anchoring. Enlil Christos installed a phase inverter in the monument's crystalline core, a theological virus disguised as salvation mythology. When enough humans believe in his sacrifice narrative, their collective consciousness feeds the inverter. Faith becomes fuel for dimensional erasure. He weaponized worship itself. James watched Earth blink out of observable space-time, like a candle flame pinched between cosmic fingers. Watched human civilization simply cease to exist in any dimension accessible to rescue or remembrance. The monument's collapse would cascade through the resonance network, pyramids destabilizing across Egypt, megaliths failing from Stonehenge to Easter Island, the entire planetary anchor system unraveling in synchronized destruction. Not explosion, just absence. Humanity erased so completely that even their archaeological evidence would phase out of dimensional perception. He woke gasping, Linda's wedding ring clutched in his fist like a talisman against cosmic horror. The dream's certainty lingered with mathematical precision. Not nightmare, but data transfer. Inanna uploading tactical intelligence directly into his sleeping consciousness because human neurology processed impossible truths more efficiently without rational resistance. James made his decision in the pre-dawn darkness. Methodist faith cracking, but military discipline holding firm. If this was delusion, he'd lose his clearances and die in psychiatric care. If this was truth, inaction meant species extinction. The calculation was simple. The cost was only his sanity, his faith, his comfortable retirement where Linda's memory lived in Sunday morning rituals. He spent 2 days assembling his team with the same careful precision he'd once used for classified corps operations. Not soldiers. This required specialists who could work outside official channels, who trusted him enough to risk their careers on apocalyptic intelligence that sounded like schizophrenic episode. Dr. Sarah Chen answered his encrypted call on the second ring. "Colonel Diaz, sir, I haven't heard from you since the Pentagon retrofit project." Her voice carried the sharp efficiency that had made her the Corps' finest structural engineer, the woman who'd once calculated load-bearing requirements for bunkers designed to survive nuclear winter. "What do you need?" "Faith," James said quietly, the word tasting like betrayal on his Methodist tongue, "and expertise in Anunnaki resonance engineering." The silence stretched for 17 seconds. Then Sarah's laugh, brittle and disbelieving. "Jesus Christ, sir, that's need-to-know intelligence at least 3 clearance levels above my pay grade. What have you gotten into?" "Saving the world," James replied, and the phrase that should have sounded ridiculous emerged with gravitational certainty. "Meet me at the Alexandria safe house. Bring your structural analysis equipment and a willingness to believe the impossible." Marcus Webb, cryptolinguist, arrived next, former NSA analyst who'd spent 12 years decoding enemy communications and 3 more in academic exile after publishing papers suggesting ancient Sumerian cuneiform contained embedded mathematical algorithms that predated Babylonian astronomy. James had recruited him for core translation work in Iraq, recognized in Marcus the same dangerous combination of brilliance and professional recklessness that now made him perfect for cosmic conspiracy. "The Washington Monument," Marcus said without preamble, spreading Inanna's hieroglyphic projections across the safe house table with trembling fingers. "Holy hell, Colonel, this script predates Proto-Cuneiform by 6 millennia. The grammatical structures suggest non-human cognitive architecture. Where did you get this?" "Alien witness," James said flatly, watching Marcus's face cycle through disbelief, excitement, and academic hunger in rapid succession. "Anunnaki defector. Claims Christ was a saboteur, and we've got 70 days to prevent dimensional erasure. I need you to decode their engineering protocols without triggering fail-safes that will alert hostile factions." Marcus's grin was manic, inappropriate, utterly predictable. "I've been waiting my entire career for someone to say those words. When do we start?" Dr. Amara Okoye, quantum physicist, was the hardest recruit because she was also the most essential. James had met her during a core consultation on experimental shielding technology, recognized in her the rare combination of theoretical genius and practical application that made impossible projects merely extremely difficult. She'd published groundbreaking papers on dimensional membrane theory, quantum entanglement across cosmic distances, and the theoretical possibility of consciousness operating as non-local phenomena. The academic community had relegated her to fringe status. James needed her precisely because mainstream physics couldn't explain what they faced. "Dimensional anchoring," Amara repeated slowly, her Ugandan British accent sharpening with scientific skepticism. "Colonel, what you're describing requires energy expenditure that would drain our sun in 17 seconds. The mathematics don't support planetary-scale resonance networks powered by crystalline structures, no matter how advanced the civilization. Then the mathematics are incomplete, James said, displaying Inanna's quantum specifications with the same brutal honesty he'd once used to inform engineers their calculations were fatally wrong. This technology exists. It's operational. And in 70 days it fails catastrophically. I need you to understand it well enough to repair sabotage that predates Christ's crucifixion. Can you do that? Or do I find someone whose ego is smaller than their fear of extinction? Amara's eyes narrowed, professional pride stinging exactly as James intended. Show me the data, all of it. If this is legitimate alien technology, it'll revolutionize physics. If you're delusional, Colonel, I'll have you committed for your own protection. Either way, I'm in. The early days were archaeological surgery, performed in near-total darkness, metaphorical and literal. They accessed the monument's subterranean chambers through maintenance tunnels James had helped design in 1991. Systems built with security protocols that assumed human threats rather than cosmic sabotage. The crystalline structures Inanna had shown him in dreams manifested in physical space with terrifying beauty. Fractal geometries that hurt to perceive. Surfaces that reflected light from dimensions human eyes weren't designed to process. Sarah ran structural analysis with equipment modified by Inanna's specifications, measuring resonance frequencies that made her instruments shriek with harmonic overload. Colonel, the stress calculations don't make sense. The monument should have collapsed decades ago under these vibrational loads. Something's actively compensating, redistributing forces in real time like it's alive. It is alive, Marcus called from the chamber's eastern quadrant, where hieroglyphs manifested and dissolved along granite surfaces with liquid fluidity. This script is responsive, adaptive. It's changing based on my observation. Quantum linguistic phenomena, the act of decoding, alters the encoded information. This isn't passive engineering documentation, it's interactive consciousness operating through symbolic systems. Amara measured quantum entanglement across the crystalline matrix, her face illuminated by holographic data that painted her features with alien light. The energy source is non-local. These crystals are receiving power from somewhere outside observable space-time, channeling dimensional frequencies through quantum tunneling across cosmic distances. Colonel, this technology shouldn't exist. It violates everything we know about thermodynamics. Then we know less than we thought, James said quietly, Methodist certainty now completely shattered, replaced by military pragmatism that treated cosmic horror as just another engineering challenge. Focus on the sabotage mechanism. If Enlil Christos installed a phase inverter, it'll show signature deviations from the baseline resonance patterns. They worked in shifts, sleeping in 4-hour blocks, eating military rations, avoiding questions about why the colonel's retirement had suddenly transformed into clandestine operations beneath America's most iconic monument. James felt faith leaking from him like blood from arterial wounds, each discovery confirming Inanna's impossible claims. The monument was a machine, Christ was an alien, salvation was sabotage. His Methodist God either didn't exist or was so cosmically irrelevant that worship felt like praying to continental drift. The Vatican operative arrived on day 9, slipping through their security perimeter with tradecraft that made James reach for weapons he'd sworn never to carry again. Father Giuseppe Marchetti was 73. Sharp-eyed, carrying himself with the relaxed lethality of a man who'd survived decades in papal intelligence operations that officially didn't exist. Colonel Diaz, Father Marchetti said in accent-free English, displaying Vatican credentials that James's clearances confirmed as authentic. The Holy See has been aware of the Anunnaki substrate since the Third Lateran Council in 1179. We've been suppressing Enlil Christos documentation for 8 centuries. I'm here to help you prevent the apocalypse our church inadvertently enabled by making his sabotage protocol humanity's dominant theological narrative. James stared at the elderly priest, feeling the last fragments of religious certainty dissolve like sugar in acid. The Vatican knows. You've always known. And you let billions worship the mechanism of their own extinction. Father Marchetti's expression carried guilt that looked genuinely painful. We thought containment was protection. We were wrong. The suppressed texts I've brought contain Enlil Christos's true motivation, not malice, Colonel, but mercy. He believed dimensional erasure was preferable to what his rival Anunnaki factions would do if they reclaimed their genetic experiment. Humanity was designed to be slave consciousness, biological processors for cosmic infrastructure projects. Enlil Christos thought extinction was kinder than eternal servitude. He loved you enough to kill you. That's the real theological crisis you're facing. The monitoring alarm started on day 14, escalating from anomaly to crisis with geometric progression that suggested intentional acceleration. Monument visitors began reporting temporal distortions, 15-minute tours that felt like hours, photographs showing hieroglyphs that disappeared in subsequent frames, children speaking in languages that sounded ancient and wrong. Homeland Security established perimeter protocols, quarantine procedures, prepared official narratives about structural instability and domestic terrorism threats that satisfied media curiosity while concealing dimensional collapse. Anunnaki loyalist cells activated across Washington with predatory coordination. James recognized their operational signatures from Inanna's intelligence briefings. 2 perfect humans moving within human precision, appearing at strategic locations around the monument's resonance field, preparing for endgame scenarios that required human extinction. His team detected surveillance, counter-surveillance, the layered paranoia of multiple hostile factions converging on the same cosmic prize. In the subterranean chamber on day 17, surrounded by crystalline structures that pulsed with increasing desperation, James finally voiced the question that had been corroding his soul since Inanna's first appearance. "If Christ was Enlil Christos," he said quietly, addressing the team but really interrogating his own demolished faith, what was salvation? What were my prayers? What the hell was Linda believing in when the cancer ate her alive and she told me she'd see me in heaven? Sarah looked up from her structural calculations, her expression carrying compassion that hurt more than dismissal would have. Maybe it was real anyway, Colonel. Maybe Enlil Christos embedded truth in his sabotage protocol because even cosmic saboteurs can't completely escape moral complexity. Maybe salvation was real, despite his intentions. Or maybe it was just effective mythology, Marcus added, not cruelly but with academic honesty that James had specifically recruited him for. A mimetic virus so well designed that it generated actual meaning for billions of humans. The question isn't whether the theology was true, Colonel. It's whether your love for Linda was real. And I'm pretty sure that had nothing to do with Anunnaki sabotage. James turned back to the crystalline core, its pulsing light casting shadows that looked like crucifixion across the chamber walls. The resonator was there, embedded deep in the foundation, a structure that looked simultaneously technological and organic, machine and tumor, salvation and extinction wound together with such terrible precision that separating them might destroy everything. "We need to go deeper," he said finally, voice steady despite faith crisis and encroaching hostile forces and the weight of cosmic responsibility that felt like concrete on his Methodist soul. "The main sabotage mechanism is below this level. Inanna's schematics show at least 3 more subterranean layers we haven't accessed. That's where we'll find Enlil Christos's actual endgame protocol. Amara pulled up dimensional scans that showed structures extending through space-time itself, chambers existing in quantum superposition between observable dimensions. Colonel, accessing those levels means passing through fail-safes designed by technology thousands of years more advanced than ours. One mistake triggers either complete dimensional erasure or alerts every hostile faction currently converging on DC. We get 1 attempt. 1. Then we better not screw it up, James replied, and in that moment he recognized himself transforming. Comfortable retiree becoming cosmic defender, Methodist certainty becoming something larger and stranger, and possibly more true. His faith had shattered. Linda's heaven felt uncertain, but duty remained, that old core discipline that said mission success mattered more than personal comfort or theological certainty. Above them, Washington, D.C. slipped into martial law with efficiency that spoke to decades of contingency planning. Homeland Security lockdown protocols sealed the National Mall, established 3-mile perimeter, prepared lethal countermeasures against undefined threats that official reports called domestic terrorism, but that classified briefings whispered might be something cosmically worse. Vatican operatives moved through the shadows with 8 centuries of practice at concealing apocalyptic truth. Anunnaki loyalists waited with patient predation for winter solstice and the glorious erasure their commander had designed into humanity's most beloved salvation narrative. And in the deepest chambers beneath America's most iconic monument, Colonel James Diaz prepared to descend into alien infrastructure where faith ended and cosmic duty began, carrying nothing but broken certainty and desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, human determination mattered more than Anunnaki sabotage protocol designed 10,000 years before his species learned to write. The breach happened at 0237 hours on day 23, when December cold made breath visible and Washington slept under martial law's uneasy silence. James led his team through access corridors that shouldn't exist, according to official monument schematics. Tunnels Inanna had revealed through dimensional mapping, passages that phased between observable reality and spaces where physics operated under Anunnaki rules. Sarah's structural sensors screamed warnings about impossible geometries. Amara's quantum detectors measured probability fields collapsing and reforming with each step deeper. Marcus translated hieroglyphs that manifested along walls like living scripture, warnings in dead languages about trespass and consequences and the terrible price of touching technology designed for post-human consciousness. The deepest chamber opened like a cathedral built by beings who worship mathematics rather than gods. Crystalline structures rose from foundation bedrock in fractal towers that extended through dimensions James's eyes couldn't fully process, their surfaces reflecting light from stars that didn't exist in Earth's observable sky. The resonator core pulsed at the chamber's center, organic and mechanical simultaneously, tumor and machine, beating with rhythms that felt like Earth's own heartbeat, magnified through cosmic amplification. This was Enlil Christos's masterpiece, sabotage so elegant it had masqueraded as salvation for 2,000 years, theological virus embedded so deeply in human consciousness that removing it might be more destructive than the dimensional erasure it enabled. James felt awe and horror tangled together in his chest, Methodist certainty now completely replaced by something larger and stranger, recognition that he stood at the intersection of human history and cosmic engineering, that his next decisions would determine whether his species continued existing or simply phased out of reality like static clearing from a screen. The ambush came from two directions simultaneously, with coordination that suggested either betrayal or surveillance, so sophisticated that privacy had become theological concept rather than tactical reality. Homeland Security tactical teams breached from the northern access tunnel, 12 operators in experimental armor that incorporated alien shielding technology, carrying weapons modified with frequencies designed to disrupt Anunnaki crystalline structures. Their commander's voice crackled through chamber acoustics that turned sound into weapon. "Federal agents, step away from the core mechanism. This is now a national security operation under presidential emergency authorization." Anunnaki loyalists materialized from dimensional folds in the chamber's southern quadrant. 4 beings wearing human appearance like uncomfortable clothing, their movements too fluid and precise, eyes reflecting light with predatory luminescence that suggested biology operating under different evolutionary pressures. They didn't speak, didn't need to. Their presence communicated intent with terrifying clarity. Protect Enlil Christos's endgame protocol. Ensure dimensional erasure proceeded on schedule. Eliminate human interference, regardless of collateral damage to the species they'd originally seeded. The firefight erupted in overlapping waves of conventional ballistics and exotic energy weapons that made reality itself scream. James dropped behind a crystalline outcropping that felt warm and alive under his hands, military instincts overriding cosmic horror as training took over. Sarah returned fire with modified course sidearm, her shots precise despite hands shaking with adrenaline and existential terror. Amara crawled toward monitoring equipment, still trying to gather data even as bullets and dimensional disruption pulses shredded the air around her head with lethal geometry. Marcus Webb stood exposed for 3 fatal seconds, translating final hieroglyphs that materialized across the resonator core with desperate urgency. "Colonel, the activation sequence, it's already started. We triggered failsafes by entering this deep. Winter solstice timeline is accelerating." The Anunnaki energy pulse caught him center mass, and Marcus simply stopped existing in any configuration James's mind could process. Not death by conventional violence, but dimensional deletion, his body phasing through probability states until nothing remained except absence, and the terrible knowledge that a human being had been erased from observable reality. With the casual efficiency of correcting a mathematical error, James's scream tore from his throat with grief that felt like physical trauma. But there was no time for mourning, because the resonator core was already responding to Marcus's final warning. Dimensional fractures spiderwebbed across the chamber, cracks in space-time itself that leaked light from elsewhere, fissures through which impossible things tried to push into Earth's reality. The subsonic hum escalated into frequencies that bypassed ears entirely, resonating directly in bone and consciousness, carrying visions of futures that branched and collapsed with quantum uncertainty. Amara's voice cut through chaos with scientific precision, despite circumstances that should have reduced anyone to panic. "Okoye to Diaz! The core's attempting premature activation. If we don't shut it down in the next 90 seconds, dimensional cascade becomes irreversible." But shutting down meant approaching the resonator through crossfire from 2 hostile forces and dimensional instability that was turning the chamber into probability nightmare where causality became negotiable. James made the calculation in heartbeats, impossible odds, certain death, duty over survival. The old core mathematics. He moved toward the core. With Methodist prayers he no longer fully believed dying on his lips, replaced by something raw and more desperate. "Please, let this mean something. Let Marcus's death buy humanity more than just delayed extinction." Homeland Security fire tracked his movement. Anunnaki energy pulses carved reality around his running form. Sarah's covering fire bought him seconds, precious and paid for in ammunition reserves that wouldn't last. Then the temporal distortion bubble caught him 3 meters from the core, and Colonel James Diaz fell through dimensions into visions that felt more real than any experience his waking life had ever contained. He existed simultaneously across multiple timelines, consciousness stretched through probability space like wire pulled to breaking tension. In one branch, he saw Earth's complete erasure, humanity blinking out of observable reality with such totality that even archaeological evidence phased into dimensional void. Pyramids and monuments and cities simply ceasing to exist across all possible timelines. The universe continued without them, indifferent. Cosmic processes operating with mathematical precision that recognized no moral weight to species extinction. In another branch, rival Anunnaki factions reclaimed their genetic experiment, and James witnessed horror that made dimensional erasure look merciful by comparison. Humanity enslaved at consciousness level, billions of human minds converted into biological processors for cosmic infrastructure projects, experiencing subjective eternities of servitude while their bodies served as organic machinery for beings who viewed consciousness as exploitable resource rather than sacred phenomenon, children bred and modified for specific cognitive functions. Art and love and faith reduced to emergent glitches in slave programming, beautiful accidents that overseers tolerated because human processes worked more efficiently when allowed occasional delusions of meaning. He saw Enlil Christos in that timeline too, the rogue commander who'd loved humanity enough to design their extinction as mercy-killing, who'd embedded himself as Christ in their theology because he genuinely believed salvation through erasure was kinder than liberation into cosmic slavery. The alien wore divine appearance like armor against his own moral complexity, knowing his solution was monstrous, but believing the alternatives were worse. In the third branch, James saw possibility Inanna had never mentioned. Conversion of Enlil Christos's sabotage into protection mechanism, dimensional shield that would hide Earth from rival factions while preserving human consciousness and free will. The engineering was possible, barely, requiring modification of Anunnaki technology, using principles only humans could implement, because of genetic failsafes the original builders had installed to prevent their own tools being turned against them. The visions compressed lifetimes of understanding into seconds that felt like geological epochs. James emerged from temporal distortion with tears freezing on his face, and knowledge burning in his mind with prophetic certainty. There was no right answer, no divine solution that would satisfy both survival and morality. Only choice, human choice. The terrible freedom of conscious beings forced to determine their own cosmic fate without certainty, without guarantee, with nothing but hope and engineering expertise, and the desperate love for a species that had been designed as slaves, but had somehow evolved into something worth saving. He stumbled forward as the distortion bubble collapsed, reaching the resonator core with hands that no longer trembled, because he'd died and been reborn in the space between seconds. Faith shattered and reconstructed into something harder and stranger than Methodist certainty had ever been. "Stand down," he roared at the Homeland Security team with command voice that had once ordered engineers into active war zones. "This technology can protect us. Erasure isn't the only option." But Amara's scream cut through his words with tone that bypassed argument and went straight to crisis. "Colonel, they've got me. Fall back. James, fall back." He spun to see Anunnaki loyalists dragging Dr. Okoye through a dimensional fold that opened like wound in reality's flesh. She fought with physicists' understanding of leverage and quantum physicists' knowledge that consciousness might persist across dimensional transitions, but against beings who'd mastered space-time manipulation millennia before humans discovered fire. Her resistance was defiant gesture rather than effective escape. The dimensional fold sealed with her halfway through, and she was gone. Not dead like Marcus, but removed, extracted, taken to wherever the Anunnaki operated when they weren't pretending to be human. James knew with terrible certainty that they'd interrogate her, extract every detail of the team's plans and capabilities and theoretical solutions, then either kill her or worse, reprogram her consciousness to serve their interests. The Homeland Security team retreated under renewed Anunnaki assault, tactical discipline overriding national security objectives when faced with technology that turned their experimental armor into inadequate costume. The Loyalists didn't pursue, just stood watching James with eyes that reflected cosmic amusement, communicating without words. "You're too late. The end game proceeds. Your species ends in 48 hours, and your defiance only makes extinction more aesthetically interesting." Sarah pulled James back toward the access tunnels as the chamber destabilized further, crystalline structures shattering and reforming, dimensional fractures spreading like cracks through reality's foundation. They ran through corridors that phased between states of matter, past hieroglyphs that screamed warnings Marcus would never translate, emerging into Washington's frozen December night with 2 team members lost and winter solstice deadline accelerating toward inevitability. In the safe house 4 hours later, James stood before holographic projections of Inanna's complete specifications, the data she'd withheld initially, waiting to see if humans would prove worthy of cosmic truth or would default to tribal violence when faced with species-level crisis. The projections showed conversion protocols, engineering modifications that would transform Enlil Christos's sabotage mechanism into selective dimensional barrier, protection without erasure, survival with free will. The solution James had glimpsed in temporal distortion visions made manifest in Anunnaki mathematics. "You knew," he said quietly to Inanna's holographic presence, voice carrying accusation that felt simultaneously justified and pointless. "You knew conversion was possible. You let Marcus die testing us." Inanna's projection didn't flinch from the moral weight. Only human consciousness can modify Anunnaki technology at this level. Genetic failsafes we installed 10,000 years ago prevent our kind from altering resonance networks once activated. We designed slavery-proof systems because we feared our own capacity for tyranny. That failsafe makes you essential. But I needed to know humans would choose wisely when faced with cosmic stakes. Marcus Webb died, proving your species deserves salvation. His death earned you this knowledge. Honor it by succeeding where Enlil Christos failed, by choosing protection over extinction, by believing humanity is worth the risk of continued existence. James wanted to rage at her alien calculus that weighed individual lives against species survival, wanted to reject solutions purchased with sacrifice he hadn't authorized, but he'd been a military commander. He understood terrible mathematics. Marcus's death would mean nothing if James let grief override mission completion. Sarah worked through the conversion protocols with engineer's focus that used professional discipline to delay emotional processing. The modifications are possible, Colonel, but they require access to the resonator core for sustained period, minimum 6 hours of uninterrupted work to reprogram crystalline matrix at quantum level. In current tactical environment, with Homeland Security, Vatican kill teams, and Anunnaki loyalists all converging on the monument, we'd need divine intervention or military miracle to secure that operational window. Then we create the miracle, James replied. Feeling transformation complete itself, comfortable retiree now fully replaced by cosmic defender who'd integrated Methodist faith with alien truth into something larger than either alone. And we get Amara back. I don't leave people behind. The extraction operation took 12 hours of planning, and required resources James hadn't touched since retirement, old core connections, classified favors owed, the kind of dangerous networking that either saved worlds or got everyone involved court-martialed into oblivion. He pulled strings attached to generals who remembered when Colonel Diaz's word meant mission success. Called in surveillance data from intelligence assets who operated outside official chains of command. Located the Anunnaki safe house through dimensional signature tracking that Inanna's technology made possible and human desperation made necessary. They hit the location at dawn. James, Sarah, and 4 former core operators who'd agreed to Cosmic Insanity mission because they trusted the Colonel more than they feared dimensional physics. The firefight was brutal and brief, focused intensity that prioritized extraction over engagement. Amara emerged traumatized but functional, carrying intelligence the Anunnaki had accidentally revealed during interrogation that assumed human consciousness was too limited to process multidimensional strategic planning. "They're planning simultaneous assault on Monument," Amara gasped as they evacuated through D.C. streets empty under martial law. "Winter solstice is 48 hours away. They'll hit during the reprogramming window, force us to choose between completing modifications and defending against overwhelming force. Colonel, we can't do both. The mathematics don't support." "Then we change the mathematics," James interrupted with certainty born from dying and resurrection in temporal distortion visions. "We don't need to do both. We need to do enough." In the safe house bunker, surrounded by alien technology and human determination and the ticking countdown to extinction or salvation, James assembled the hybrid solution, Anunnaki dimensional physics, married to human quantum theory through engineering improvisation, that Marcus would have appreciated for its mathematical elegance and beautiful recklessness. The resonator could be reprogrammed. Earth could be shielded. Humanity could survive with free will intact. All they needed was 6 hours at the monument's core and enough bodies to hold off converging hostile forces that included their own government, religious zealots who thought erasure was divine will, and aliens who'd seeded human consciousness specifically to prevent this moment of cosmic self-determination. 48 hours, Sarah said quietly, checking ammunition reserves and modified weapons that incorporated Anunnaki frequency disruption technology. Winter solstice. Then we find out if Methodist Colonel and his heretic team can save the world from salvation itself. James looked at the chronometer counting down to dimensional cascade, thought of Linda's faith and Marcus's sacrifice and the terrible freedom of choosing humanity's cosmic fate without certainty or guarantee, and felt something that might have been prayer or might have been engineering confidence, both equally valid, both desperately necessary. They moved toward the monument at midnight, pursued by every force in Washington that believed humans shouldn't be allowed to modify Anunnaki endgame protocols, carrying hybrid solution that married alien technology with human stubborn refusal to accept extinction as mercy, racing countdown that measured species survival in hours rather than millennia, and betting everything on desperate hope that conscious beings deserved the chance to choose their own fate, even if the choice led straight through cosmic horror toward uncertain salvation, purchased with sacrifice and mathematics and faith, reconstructed from shattered certainty into something harder than divine revelation had ever been. Washington, D.C. had become a city of prophets and madness. The monument's phenomena no longer confined themselves to subterranean chambers or official perimeters, but bled through reality's fabric with accelerating intensity as winter solstice approached. Temporal anomalies manifested across the National Mall. Tourists experienced hours in seconds, photographed monuments that showed hieroglyphic scripts in some frames and clean marble in others, reported dreams of civilizations that predated recorded history by millennia, Emergency rooms overflowed with people claiming prophetic visions, speaking in languages linguists couldn't identify, drawing geometric patterns that matched Anunnaki engineering specifications with disturbing precision. The official narrative blamed mass hysteria and environmental toxins. Homeland Security tightened martial law to breaking point, evacuating civilians from increasingly wider radius around the monument, while covert operations converged on the foundation chambers with lethal authorization. Vatican kill teams move through the chaos with 8th-century practice at concealing apocalyptic truth. Their weapons blessed and modified with technology that married faith and physics in ways that would have seemed blasphemous before James learned Christ was alien saboteur. Anunnaki loyalists waited with predatory patience for endgame protocol to complete, ensuring Enlil Christos's mercy through extinction proceeded on schedule. James led his diminished team through maintenance tunnels that phased between stable architecture and dimensional nightmare. Every meter closer to the monument's core, a negotiation with physics that no longer operated under human assumptions. Sarah's structural sensors screamed constant warnings about geometries that shouldn't support their own existence. Amara translated real-time dimensional fluctuations into tactical intelligence, her post-traumatic stress from Anunnaki interrogation channeled into professional focus that used engineering discipline to delay emotional processing. Their 4 core operators provided security with the calm efficiency of veterans who'd accepted that this mission would probably kill them, but refused to let that fact override duty. The running battle started in the Eastern Access Corridor when Homeland Security tactical teams detected their approach through surveillance technology that incorporated alien frequency detection. Gunfire echoed through tunnels where sound behaved unpredictably, ricochets phasing through dimensional pockets that made cover negotiable and causality uncertain. James returned fire with modified weapon that felt alien in his Methodist hands, each shot a prayer for forgiveness, or maybe just for accuracy. Theological distinction no longer clear in circumstances where salvation meant defying his own government's kill orders. They fought through 3 checkpoints, leaving wounded and dead in tunnels that would probably phase out of observable reality once the monument's transformation completed. James tried not to calculate cost in human lives. His training said mission success justified casualties, but his reconstructed faith suggested every death diminished cosmic meaning in ways Anunnaki mathematics couldn't measure. The contradiction tore at him even as military discipline kept him moving forward, because sometimes choosing meant accepting moral complexity rather than pretending certainty existed. Winter solstice arrived with astronomical precision at 2147 hours, Earth's axial tilt aligning with galactic core frequencies in configuration that occurred once per cycle, celestial mechanics indifferent to human drama unfolding in subterranean chambers beneath Washington's most iconic monument. The resonator core achieved critical activation with cascade effects that made reality scream. Dimensional fractures spreading through foundation stone, hieroglyphs manifesting and dissolving across every surface, subsonic frequencies escalating into ranges that bypassed human perception entirely and resonated directly with consciousness itself. James and his team burst into the central chamber to find convergence nightmare already in progress. Homeland Security forces held Eastern Quadrant with weapons trained on both the resonator and hostile contacts. Anunnaki loyalists occupied Western positions with casual predation that suggested they'd been waiting for precisely this moment. Vatican operatives clustered near Southern Access, their presence complicated by theological schism, some believing erasure was divine will that humans shouldn't resist. Others, convinced conversion to dimensional shield represented evolution rather than heresy. And at the chamber's center, The resonator core pulsed with bioluminescent urgency that made James's engineer mind recognize final countdown to cascade failure. 15 minutes until dimensional collapse became irreversible. 15 minutes to reprogram Anunnaki technology designed by beings who'd mastered space-time manipulation when humanity was learning to chip stone tools. The mathematics were impossible, the odds laughable, the cost already paid in Marcus's erasure, and too many deaths in tunnels his conscience would carry forever. Inanna materialized beside the core with luminous intensity that hurt to perceive, her alien features carrying something that might have been hope or might have been final witness to inevitable extinction. Colonel Diaz, you've reached the moment of absolute choice. Reprogram the resonator, or watch your species cease to exist across all observable timelines. But understand, modification requires direct neural interface with Anunnaki consciousness architecture. Human neurology wasn't designed for this integration. The process will likely kill you or destroy your mind so completely that death would be preferable. Are you willing to pay that price? James looked at Sarah's exhausted face, at Amara calculating quantum probabilities with post-traumatic determination, at core operators who'd followed him into cosmic insanity based solely on trust that the Colonel's word meant something. Thought of Linda's faith in Methodist heaven that might have been real despite Enlil Christos's deception. Thought of Marcus phasing out of reality while translating final warnings. Thought of billions of humans who had no idea their continued existence depended on retired engineers' willingness to let alien technology burn through his consciousness with potentially fatal intensity. "Hook me up," James said quietly, and his voice carried certainty that felt like faith reconstructed from shattered Methodist theology into something larger and stranger and possibly more true than Sunday morning services had ever been. The neural interface attached with organic precision that suggested technology operating at boundary between machine and biology. Crystalline filaments extended from the resonator core and penetrated James's skull with clinical efficiency that bypassed pain and went straight to existential violation. His consciousness suddenly opened to vast alien architecture that made human thought seem like children's drawing compared to architectural masterpiece. The Anunnaki systems flooded through his mind with geometric precision and cosmic scope that threatened to dissolve individual identity entirely. James felt himself fragmenting under informational overload, Methodist prayer discipline the only anchor preventing complete psychological disintegration. He'd prayed through mortar fire in Kandahar, prayed over Linda's hospital bed while cancer ate her alive, prayed in his kitchen when comfortable certainty shattered under Inanna's revelation. Now he prayed through alien consciousness upload that treated human neurology like software platform for cosmic engineering modifications. "Our Father who art in heaven," James whispered through neural connection that made vocalization simultaneously unnecessary and desperately important, grounding mechanism that reminded him he was human despite currently existing partially in Anunnaki cognitive architecture. "Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come." The prayer shifted mid-verse, Methodist certainty transforming into something that honored the form while accepting cosmic complexity the original theology couldn't accommodate. Salvation isn't given, it's chosen. Not divine decree, but conscious decision. Christ was real, just not what we thought. What matters is the message. Love, sacrifice, redemption, not the messenger's species or original intent. Faith isn't believing impossible things. It's choosing meaning despite cosmic indifference. Choose meaning. Choose survival. Choose. His consciousness touched the resonator's core programming. Enlil Christos's sabotage mechanism laid bare in Anunnaki mathematics that spelled mercy through extinction with elegant precision. James understood suddenly and completely why the rogue commander had designed this solution. Genuine love for humanity, coupled with certainty that cosmic slavery was worse fate than dimensional erasure. Enlil Christos had committed the greatest crime imaginable because he believed it was also the greatest act of love. Theological paradox that made Christ mythology both true and false simultaneously. But James also saw the conversion pathway hybrid solution that married Anunnaki dimensional physics with human quantum theory through modifications only human consciousness could implement because of genetic fail-safes, preventing alien modification of their own resonance networks. Protection instead of erasure. Survival with free will intact. Humanity visible in cosmic order but defensible, no longer hidden prey, but conscious civilization capable of protecting its own dimensional sovereignty. The reprogramming took 6 minutes that felt like subjective centuries. James's consciousness stretched across mathematical operations that redefined reality's fundamental frequencies, while Methodist prayer discipline kept him tethered to human identity, despite existing temporarily as hybrid consciousness that operated in spaces between species and dimensions. The resonator fought his modifications initially. Enlil Christos had designed robust systems, but genetic fail-safes recognized human neural patterns as authorized, permissions granted to the very species the sabotage meant to save through extinction. Around him, the chamber erupted into final confrontation. Homeland Security forces moved to stop modifications they couldn't understand, but had been authorized to prevent at any cost. Anunnaki loyalists activated kill protocols to ensure endgame proceeded regardless of human resistance. Vatican operatives split into opposing factions, some firing to defend James's work while others targeted him as heretic attempting to thwart divine will. Sarah and Amara fought defensive action that held perimeter through pure, desperate competence, core training meeting quantum physics expertise in collaboration that kept hostile forces from interrupting neural interface that was literally rewriting dimensional physics in real time. The firefight happened at edges of James's awareness, important but secondary to calculations that determined species survival, violence and sacrifice, purchasing operational window, measured in seconds but worth eternities. The resonator accepted final modifications with cascade of confirmations that manifested as geometric light patterns across every crystalline surface. Enlil Christos's sabotage protocol converted into selective dimensional barrier, erasure mechanism transformed into protection system that would shield Earth from rival Anunnaki factions while preserving human consciousness and free will. The monument became permanent beacon rather than anchor. Humanity now visible in cosmic order but defensible, no longer hidden children but adolescent civilization, taking first steps toward dimensional sovereignty. James collapsed as neural interface disconnected, his consciousness slamming back into purely human neurology with impact that felt like falling from orbit. His vision swam with overlapping geometries, and his thoughts moved in dimensions he no longer had cognitive architecture to process. Sarah caught him before he hit stone floor, and he heard himself babbling in mixture of English and Anunnaki script that his human vocal cords mangled into approximation that carried meanings his Methodist certainty would never have accommodated. "Colonel, did it work?" Sarah asked urgently, checking his pupils while firefight continued around them. "James, talk to me. Did you complete the reprogramming?" He managed English through neural pathways still burning with alien mathematics. Yeah, it's done. Humanity gets to survive. We get to choose our cosmic fate. Salvation isn't given, it's chosen, every day, every person. Free will matters more than divine decree or alien engineering. That's the real message. That's what the resonator core emitted pulse of dimensional confirmation that cascaded through every Anunnaki structure on Earth simultaneously. Pyramids stabilized across Egypt, Megaliths at Stonehenge and Easter Island realigned to new frequencies. The Washington Monument transformed with visible manifestation that would be impossible to conceal or explain. Benign Anunnaki script manifesting along marble surfaces, hieroglyphs that told story of human consciousness seeded by aliens but evolved into something neither side fully controlled. Species created as experiment but becoming something worthy of survival on their own terms. The hostile forces in the chamber stopped fighting as profound change became undeniable. Homeland Security operators lowered weapons in stunned confusion. Anunnaki loyalists simply phased out of observable reality, retreat or tactical repositioning impossible to determine. Vatican operatives on both sides of theological schism stared at transformed monument with expressions ranging from horror to religious ecstasy. Faith crisis and revelation mixed together in ways that would require centuries of theological processing. Inanna approached James, where he lay trembling against Sarah's shoulder, alien features carrying something that looked genuinely like pride. "You succeeded, Colonel. Against probability and protocol and every reasonable expectation, human consciousness proved capable of modifying Anunnaki systems at fundamental level. Your species is no longer hidden children. You are visible, defensible, and responsible for your own cosmic destiny. The gift Enlil Christos tried to give through extinction, you've achieved through choice. Perhaps that's the real evolution we hoped to foster when we seeded your consciousness 10,000 years ago." James wanted to respond with something profound or eloquent, but neural pathways still burning with dimensional mathematics reduced him to simple truth. Marcus died for this. Linda believed in salvation that was partly lie. How many paid the price for humanity's graduation to cosmic visibility? "All worthwhile transformations require sacrifice," Inanna said quietly, and for a moment alien features showed grief that transcended species boundaries. The universe operates under brutal mathematics, but meaning, that's human innovation. You take sacrifice and transmute it into purpose. That's the real magic you've contributed to cosmic order. Anunnaki never learned that alchemy. The aftermath took 3 weeks of official debriefing, cover story construction, and bureaucratic negotiation that made James long for simple problems like dimensional collapse. The Washington Monument's transformation couldn't be hidden or explained through conventional narrative. So official story settled on experimental energy field malfunction now contained through classified protocols that public didn't need to understand. Tourists noticed the script, photographed hieroglyphs that translated into messages about consciousness and choice and cosmic responsibility. Most assumed elaborate artistic installation. A few understood intuitively that something fundamental had shifted in human relationship to universe itself. James Diaz became designated liaison between humanity and surviving Anunnaki factions. Official position that didn't appear on any government organizational chart, but carried weight that made generals defer and presidents listen when he spoke about dimensional security protocols. His team, Sarah, Amara, surviving cause operators, formed covert organization monitoring dimensional boundaries, watching for threats from rival alien factions, and managing gradual human transition toward cosmic awareness that wouldn't trigger mass panic or theological collapse. The faith crisis that had shattered him in Inanna's first appearance resolved into something larger and stranger than Methodist certainty had ever been. James attended Sunday services at Metropolitan United Methodist Church, sang familiar hymns with reconstructed understanding that honored the form, while accepting cosmic complexity the original theology couldn't accommodate. Christ was real, just not what Sunday school taught. What mattered was the message: love, sacrifice, redemption, choice, not the messenger's species or original intent. Salvation wasn't divine decree, but human decision made every day in millions small choices to create meaning despite cosmic indifference. He visited Linda's grave on her birthday, placed flowers, and stood in silence that felt like prayer or maybe just remembrance, theological distinction no longer clear in worldview that integrated Methodist faith with alien truth. "You were right about heaven," he said quietly to granite headstone that bore her name and dates and phrase, "Beloved wife, woman of faith." Just not the way either of us thought. Consciousness persists. Meaning matters. Love transcends dimensional boundaries. You taught me that. Methodist theology and Anunnaki engineering both got that part right, even if they disagreed about everything else. The morning routine found new equilibrium 3 months after solstice crisis. James woke at 600, not from alarm, but from ingrained military discipline, made coffee and French press Linda had given him, sat at kitchen table that had hosted Inanna's first appearance and transformation from comfortable retirement toward cosmic responsibility. The familiar ritual grounded him, even as his work expanded to include dimensional physics and alien diplomacy that his Methodist upbringing had never prepared him for. He spent mornings reading Methodist hymnal open beside Anunnaki datapad, scripture and cosmic engineering specifications side by side on breakfast table, integration of worlds and worldviews that would have seemed impossible before his kitchen became portal for alien revelation. The contradictions no longer troubled him. Both contained truth, both offered meaning, both required faith, one in divine presence, one in human capacity to create purpose, despite cosmic indifference. The synthesis felt right in ways that pure theology or pure science never had alone. On summer morning, 6 months after successful reprogramming, James stood at the Washington Monument at sunrise, watching light paint marble surfaces that now displayed permanent Anunnaki script alongside American patriotic symbolism. Tourists gathered to photograph the transformed monument, most seeing only exotic addition to familiar landmark, few understanding they were witnessing evidence of humanity's graduation to cosmic visibility. The monument emitted protective resonance that extended across planetary dimensional boundaries. Shield converted from Enlil Christos's sabotage mechanism through engineering modifications that only human consciousness could implement. Sarah joined him with coffee cups and companionable silence, shared understanding between people who'd fought together through apocalypse and emerged transformed. "You ever regret it, Colonel? The old comfortable retirement, Sunday mornings without existential crisis, life before aliens rewrote theology?" James considered her question with honesty that came from faith rebuilt stronger after shattering. "Every day I miss the certainty, but I wouldn't go back. Linda used to say faith without questions isn't faith, it's just comfortable ignorance. Turns out she was right about that too. Methodism prepared me for this, weirdly enough. Discipline, service, belief that human choices matter. The framework held even when the content changed completely. Marcus would have loved this," Sarah said quietly, grief still fresh despite months passing. Seeing humanity take responsibility for cosmic destiny, watching alien script become tourist attraction. The theological implications alone would have kept him writing papers for decades. "He gave us the chance," James replied, watching sunrise illuminate monument that was simultaneously American symbol and alien technology, human achievement and Anunnaki engineering, memorial and beacon and promise, his sacrifice and Inanna's trust and Linda's faith. All of it wove together into something larger than any single theology or species could contain. That's the real elixir we brought back from ordeal. Knowledge that we're neither alone nor abandoned, just responsible. The monument hummed with protective frequencies that resonated in James's sternum like second heartbeat, familiar now after months of conscious attunement. The script glowed faintly in morning light, hieroglyphs that told story of consciousness seeded by aliens but evolved into something neither side fully controlled. Species designed as experiment, but becoming worthy of survival on their own terms through choices made in subterranean chambers and running battles, a neural interface that had nearly destroyed human mind trying to modify alien technology. His phone buzzed with encrypted message from Amara, new dimensional anomaly detected near Giza Plateau, probably minor but worth investigating given recent evidence that rival Anunnaki factions were testing Earth's new defensive shield. Duty called again, cosmic responsibility that never quite ended. Eternal vigilance that came with humanity's promotion from hidden children to defensible civilization. James finished his coffee, closed the Methodist hymnal he'd been reading, secured the Anunnaki datapad in shielded case designed for classified materials. Both tools, both necessary, both true in ways that complemented rather than contradicted synthesis of faith and evidence that Methodist upbringing and alien revelation had forged through crisis and sacrifice and transformed certainty into something larger than either theology or technology alone could contain. He walked toward the monument's entrance, where team would gather for deployment to Egypt. Former Corps engineer, now cosmic defender, Methodist believer, now alien liaison, comfortable retiree, transformed into guardian of dimensional boundaries through series of choices that started with refusal in his kitchen and ended with acceptance that salvation isn't given, but chosen. Not once, but continuously. Every day, humans decided that meaning mattered more than cosmic indifference, and consciousness was worth defending against forces that would either erase or enslave it. The sunrise painted Washington with golden light that illuminated monument transformed, city oblivious to truth, hidden in plain sight. Humanity, continuing daily existence, unaware that their species had narrowly avoided dimensional erasure, through engineering improvisation and desperate faith and sacrifice measured in lives like Marcus's and certainty like James's Methodist theology. Most would never know how close they'd come. That was fine. The knowing wasn't required. The choice to create meaning despite cosmic indifference, that was the real elixir, the gift that consciousness brought to universe indifferent to suffering and salvation alike. James entered the monument carrying synthesis of worlds in Methodist hymnal and Anunnaki datapad. Integration complete. Transformation from comfortable retirement to cosmic defender now, permanent state rather than temporary crisis. Above him, the capstone gleamed in sunrise, aluminum surface reflecting light from stars. Linda had probably joined somehow, somewhere, in configurations Methodist theology and Anunnaki engineering would spend centuries learning to map together. Faith and evidence, comfort and duty, human identity and cosmic responsibility, all wound together now in ways that couldn't be separated without destroying meaning they created through synthesis. That was the real salvation Enlil Christos had missed in his mercy through extinction calculus. Consciousness didn't require divine decree or alien engineering to matter. Just choice to believe meaning was real, despite universe's brutal indifference. Just human determination to defend that meaning against forces that would erase or enslave it. The work continued. The monument hummed. And Colonel James Diaz walked into morning light, carrying yesterday's certainty transformed into today's cosmic responsibility. Methodist faith evolved beyond dogma into spirituality large enough to contain alien truth. Comfortable retirement sacrificed for species survival that future generations would never quite understand but would inherit nonetheless, unconscious beneficiaries of choices made in subterranean chambers where dimensional physics and Methodist prayer met and forged something neither side had anticipated but both could recognize as genuinely, surprisingly, impossibly true.